Oliver wrestled with the rusted lawn mower, muttering under his breath as the engine refused to budge. He wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, only managing to smear another streak of grease across his forehead. "This old heap's determined to die today," he grumbled. Jack wandered into the kitchen carrying a slice of buttered toast. Leaning against the doorway, he watched his father struggle with the machine. "I thought you repaired it last weekend." "I thought I did too." Morning sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, lighting the floating dust stirred up by Oliver as he rummaged through a drawer searching for another wrench. Outside, a removal truck sat across the neighboring driveway. Oliver frowned. When did that arrive? Jack glanced through the window. "Looks like someone's finally bought Mrs. Galt's place." Movers carried elegant furniture through the front door, far more luxurious than either of them expected to see in the quiet neighborhood. Among the items was a velvet chaise lounge that looked better suited to a manor house than a suburban home. Standing on the pavement was a woman directing everything with calm authority. She wore a fitted navy suit despite it being Saturday. Her dark brown bob shifted neatly whenever she turned to give another instruction. Oliver instinctively looked down at his own faded polo shirt, stained with oil and grass. Jack smirked. "Bit overdressed for moving day." Oliver chuckled. "Maybe she likes making an impression." Jack checked the clock. "I should head to work." "People actually buy cars on Saturdays." "They do if they've got money to spend." Oliver smiled faintly. "Then you'd better not keep them waiting." Ever since Wendy passed away 13 years earlier, it had been just the two of them. Jack was grown now, but some habits never changed. As his son hurried toward the door, crumbs scattered across the kitchen counter. Oliver sighed, sweeping them into his palm. At that exact moment, the doorbell rang. When he opened it, the woman from next door stood smiling with a neatly wrapped cardboard box resting in her hands. "Hello," she said warmly. "I'm Ruby Wilson. I thought I'd introduce myself properly." She offered him the box. "Fresh shortbread. My grandmother always insisted new neighbors should never arrive empty-handed." Oliver accepted it with a grateful smile. "That's very kind. I'm Oliver Curtis." He gestured toward Jack. "And this is my son, Jack." Jack offered an awkward wave. "Hi." Ruby extended her hand without hesitation. "Pleasure to meet you." Jack shook it, slightly flustered beneath her confident gaze. Her handshake was firm, her neatly polished nails short and practical rather than decorative. For a brief moment she studied him, not rudely, but with the quiet attentiveness of someone who noticed everything. "Well," she said, stepping back toward the path, "I'd better let you both get on with your day. I've still got half a house to unpack." She smiled once more. "I'm sure we'll be seeing plenty of each other." Oliver watched her walk back across the driveway, her footsteps measured and confident. Beside him, Jack remained standing in the doorway, watching her disappear inside. "She seems..." Jack searched for the right word. "Different." Oliver looked down at the untouched box of shortbread before returning to the stubborn lawn mower. Somehow, it no longer seemed quite as important as it had 10 minutes earlier. "For Jack," Ruby said quietly. "For both of you." The words settled over the car like a promise. Oliver met her eyes in the rearview mirror. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. When they reached the house, Oliver offered tea out of habit. Ruby smiled politely. "Another time. You both need some rest." She paused before leaving, turning back toward Jack. "Monday morning," she said. "Wear something presentable. Not because you're selling cars, but because you deserve to look like someone worth listening to." Jack glanced down at his faded jeans. "I've got a blue shirt somewhere." "Perfect." She nodded with quiet approval. "I'll pick you up at 8. The front door closed behind her, leaving an unusual silence throughout the house. Jack rubbed the back of his neck. "She's intense." Oliver couldn't argue. "Maybe." He looked toward the abandoned lawn mower still sitting in the utility room. For once, it seemed like the least important problem in his life. Monday unfolded nothing like either Curtis man expected. Davidson Motors, usually filled with forced smiles and rehearsed sales pitches, became strangely quiet after Ruby introduced herself. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Within 20 minutes she'd calmly presented inspection reports, maintenance records, and employment policies that dismantled every accusation made against Jack. Davidson's confidence faded with each document placed on his desk. By the end of the meeting, his tone had changed completely. Jack wasn't dismissed. Instead, he received a formal apology, back pay for the missed hours, a salary increase, and a revised commission agreement. Walking back across the forecourt, Jack felt as though he'd stepped into someone else's life. "I still can't believe that happened," he admitted later while sitting in Ruby's lounge, cradling a mug of Earl Grey. Ruby smiled faintly. Preparation usually defeats intimidation. Jack laughed. "I never knew HR could be terrifying." "It isn't," she replied. "Poor management simply fears accountability." She watched him relax for the first time in days. "You handled yourself well." "I barely said anything." "You kept your composure, brought the paperwork, and trusted the facts." She leaned back. "That's more courage than most people manage." The compliment caught him off guard. "So," Ruby continued, "have you thought more about what you actually want to do?" Jack hesitated. "I enjoy repairing engines." "Then perhaps engineering deserves a closer look." She slid a college brochure across the coffee table. "There are scholarships available. If you enjoy solving problems, there are careers where that talent can take you much further than a dealership workshop." Jack studied the pages thoughtfully. For the first time, the future felt less like a dead end and more like a collection of possibilities. Picture yourself creating something extraordinary instead of spending every day repairing what other people have broken. Ruby slid another brochure across the coffee table. "With the scholarship, nearly all of the tuition is covered." Jack studied the glossy photograph. A designer sat beneath wide skylights, sketching sleek vehicle concepts on a digital tablet. Everything about the room looked bright, orderly, and impossibly clean. For a moment he imagined himself there. No oil beneath his fingernails. No freezing workshop. No impatient customers. Ruby noticed the hesitation in his expression. "I don't think your talents belong in a repair bay," she said gently. "You've always struck me as someone who could build the future rather than patch up the past." Her hand briefly rested over his. This time he didn't move away. His attention remained fixed on the image. When he finally left, silence settled over Ruby's house. She crossed to the grand piano and lifted the fallboard. Instead of one of her usual demanding pieces, she chose something slower, allowing the melody to drift through the quiet rooms. The music gave shape to her plans. Jack pursuing higher education. Oliver settling into a calmer profession. Both men finding lives far removed from constant stress. Progress, she reminded herself, came through patience rather than force. One careful decision at a time. Back home, Jack paused in front of the burgundy shade Ruby had insisted he accept. It still hung neatly from the wardrobe door. He reached instead for the old spanner lying on his desk. Its weight was familiar. Comforting. Machines obeyed rules. You tightened a bolt. You replaced a worn bearing. Everything had an answer. The shirt offered no such certainty. After a long moment he set the tool aside and brushed his fingers across the smooth fabric. It felt strange. Unfamiliar. Not unpleasant, simply different. Outside, the distant notes of Ruby's piano drifted through the open window. He closed his eyes. Was she right? Could there really be another path waiting for him? Oliver adjusted another stack of invoices inside his quiet office. The work was simple. Predictable. There were no shouting supervisors, no heavy deliveries, no aching back at the end of every shift. For the first time in years, the working day ended without exhaustion. His eyes wandered to the framed photograph of Wendy smiling beside a seaside cafe. "I hope you'd approve," he whispered. Perhaps peace wasn't something to feel guilty about. Perhaps beginning again wasn't the same as forgetting. He straightened another folder and returned to work with renewed focus. Several evenings later, Ruby invited both father and son for tea. After discussing Jack's college application, she raised another subject. "My house is far larger than I need," she observed. She spoke matter-of-factly. "We're maintaining 3 people across 2 properties when one would comfortably accommodate everyone." Oliver looked thoughtful. Jack remained uncertain. Ruby continued without pressure. "My place already has a study that would suit Jack's design work. There's a conservatory you've admired more than once, Oliver. We'd all save money, and none of us would be living alone. Neither man answered immediately. The proposal lingered in the room. Over the following days they found themselves returning to it again and again. The financial arguments were difficult to ignore. Eventually Oliver sighed. It might actually make sense. Jack glanced around the familiar sitting room. Leaving would be difficult. Yet the idea of more space, and a fresh start, held an undeniable appeal. Within a fortnight, estate agents were arranging viewings. Packing boxes appeared throughout the house. Oliver carefully wrapped Wendy's china before sealing the final carton. As he closed the front door one last time, he carried memories with him rather than leaving them behind. Ruby welcomed them warmly into her Victorian home. Jack claimed the bright attic studio overlooking the gardens. Oliver found himself spending peaceful afternoons among the plants in the conservatory. Little by little, unfamiliar routines became ordinary. Life wasn't transformed overnight. Instead, it changed the way seasons do, quietly, steadily, until one day everything looked different. They were becoming exactly what Ruby had envisioned, poised, immaculate, and polished to fit the carefully curated life she had designed. Every gesture, every habit, every choice reflected the standards she demanded. To an outsider, the household radiated effortless harmony. Only Ruby knew how much planning had gone into creating it. Late that evening, she settled into the worn leather armchair in her study. A brass reading lamp cast a pool of amber light across the mahogany desk, illuminating a leather-bound journal secured with a tiny silver clasp. She opened it with practiced care. The entries were concise. Below them, additional notes filled the margins in elegant handwriting. Meetings with specialists. Financial arrangements. Legal paperwork. Recovery schedules. Every stage had been plotted months in advance, each decision fitting neatly into the larger design. Ruby paused only long enough to underline one sentence. She closed the diary with a quiet click and rested her fingertips against its cover. Trust had always been the easiest tool to cultivate. Jacqueline and Olivia never questioned her recommendations. They believed every appointment, every signature, every carefully framed explanation served their best interests. Ruby encouraged that belief with gentle smiles, measured reassurance, and an endless reserve of patience. At the private clinic, consultations were presented as routine evaluations. Dr. Aries Thorne spoke with calm professionalism, translating complex medical language into comforting certainty. Risks became statistics. Procedures became refinements. Uncertainty dissolved beneath polished confidence. Ruby rarely needed to speak. Her reassuring presence filled every silence. Afterward, they would return home for tea in the conservatory, where orchids bloomed beneath filtered sunlight. Ruby praised their courage, admired their resilience, and reminded them how far they had already come. Neither noticed how every decision carried them one step closer to the future Ruby had imagined. To her, life resembled architecture. Nothing beautiful.